Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining the Staff Development Day presented by ERAC, which is the Employee Relations Advisory Committee. I hope you're enjoying some of the sessions that we had today. As mentioned before, all today's sessions have been recorded, and the recordings will be posted on the ERAC website. My name is Holly Tran, and I'm the Vice Chair for ERAC. I will be co-hosting today's Zoom for Weston Connor from the admissions office. Weston will be presenting us with the navigation with the college admissions process as a parent. Weston, the floor is all yours. I will monitor the chat. If you have any questions or comments, you feel free to throw them in there and we will address them at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you, Holly. So hi, everybody. As she said, my name is Weston Connor. So I have two confessions to make. One, I'm not Sarah Bombard, which you probably figured out, if not from the introduction from this or just from looking at me. Sarah wasn't able to make it today, but I'm happy to be filling in for her. The other confession that I guess I have for all of you is that, unlike Sarah, I am also not a parent. So I can't explicitly relate to that, but I think that I can still do a pretty good job of helping you guys learn a little bit about what navigating the college admissions process looks like, which, you know, there are some similarities to navigating it as a student. I imagine it has probably changed for some of you since some of you guys went through the college admissions process, but we're going to do our best to share a lot with you. So I'm going to pull up my slide deck over here. And I said, I am happy to kind of answer some questions as we go along. I guess I'd ask if you have some, maybe write them down, or if you want me to address them in particular, save them to the end. That way we can get through some of this info. I'm sure we'll have some time to go over some more things as we go along here. So what does navigating the college admissions process look like? As a student, as a parent, as a person who doesn't work in an admissions office? Step one, relax. Except as Sarah jokingly made, I know that you're not going to do that. And in fairness, probably neither are your students. So what I actually want to do is really take a little bit of time to help you guys start where you are, right? And in this case, I guess I mean with your students. So I'm assuming that most people in here today are probably parents. Just maybe a quick thumbs up or emoji if you can show. I'm just kind of curious, how many of you guys have students who are not in high school yet, so younger than high school age? Okay, cool. So you guys are way ahead of the process. How many of you guys are kind of 9th or 10th graders are your children? Okay, cool. So you got some people who are early in the college search process as well. And I imagine there are a couple people in here who are most likely have some 11th graders, 12th graders. Yeah. Couple people, cool. Okay, so we got some folks for all over. So I will just say, for those of you with only kids younger than high school, don't sweat it. It's fine, you got some time. And really the same holds true for 9th graders and 10th graders, right? The most important thing about this is starting where you are. Do not be fretting, thinking that you need to have a complete understanding of what the college admissions process looks like, that your student needs to be setting themselves up to do that college application, starting right from their first day in 9th grade. That is not true. There are things they can do. There are things they should start by doing, right? One of them seems really obvious: selecting the high school courses. The thing I always tell people is, there are tracks you can get on in high school that are going to start you down a specific path, whether that's a math sequence, some of that starts in middle school, whether it's setting yourself up with honors courses or AP courses or IB courses. I always tell students, and I think that this is good advice for parents to have too, is your students should challenge themselves as much as they're able in the things that they're interested in the things that they want to do, right? You only live once. If doing 5 AP courses is too much, and your son, your daughter, your student, whomever isn't going to have time to do the things they enjoy, to be with friends, to do sports, to do music, to take part in those other activities, they don't need to push themselves that hard. They should push themselves as much as they're able to with accounting for their own mental health, with accounting for the time to do those other things. Part of that time early in high school is also for them to identify their own strengths, their own weaknesses, the things that they enjoy, the things that they're good at, right? That's good life practice in addition to being good preparation for the college application process. So make sure that they take some of that time to be able to try some of those things, to explore as their high school allows, and to push themselves as they're able. And the thing that you're going to see kind of underpinning this whole process is learning the vocabulary. like any field, college admissions, the admissions process, there's some jargon, right? There's things like ED, RD, there's rolling admissions, there's early action. I'm going to touch more on those in particular, but that's something you can start out with from the very get-go, just making sure you understand what these terms mean, what they're going to be doing, how they're going to impact you down the road. As you start moving up in high school, or as your student does, they can start to think a little bit about possible career interests. And I don't mean this to say that in 10th grade, your child needs to know exactly what their career is going to be, right? I had no idea in high school or in college that this is what I was going to be doing a couple of years, I guess 5 years out of college at this point. But thinking a little bit about what they're interested in, what they might want to explore and try will help with the college search process, will also help them as a student moving forward. Once you get into 11th grade, that's, I'm going to say, where you really want to start diving more deeply into the college application process as a whole, and not necessarily working on the college application, though you could start thinking a little bit about what a college essay might look like, but really starting to explore. So some things are going to stay the same, right? Continue to pick those challenging high school courses, continue exploring some of that, but also start working on a list of colleges. Whether these are just ones you want to explore, whether they're ones that your student is going to want to apply to, take that time to start visiting the schools, right? That's going to give you a different perspective. You're going to be able to do some research on them, collect some questions that you want to be asking consistently across the schools. Some of the things you care about, I'll touch more on what some of those might want to be later, but also start taking notes on the answers that you receive. So this is really going to be like a big information gathering phase is what I would call it, right? Figure out what's working for you, what's working for your student, what's not. And then 12th grade is where you're really going to buckle down and your student's going to be in that application process, right? You can continue visiting colleges in that time frame. And I think you probably should, as you're narrowing down your list, figuring out where to apply to. And this is also the part where you're going to want to manage expectations a little bit, right? I talk with students, I talk to people who have applied to 16 colleges, universities, more than 16, more than 20. They think that they're going to get into, 3 of the Ivy League schools that they applied to, and they're going to get in everywhere. And that's not true, right? Most likely not. Some people would call some of those schools highly selective colleges and universities. Lehigh falls under that. Some people would call them highly rejective colleges and universities, depending on how you want to look at it. But the truth of the matter is, right, you need to be able to manage those expectations. Most likely, your student is not going to get into every school that they apply to, and that's okay. But craft your list with that in mind, have some expectations, and work then on finalizing that application from, the college essay, if they're using the common application or the coalition application, the supplemental applications that are specific to different schools. This is where you're going to really work on that, dive into that, but also take that time again to do other things, right? This is not the only thing that matters. Where your student goes to college is not the most important thing that they're going to do in their life. It might seem like it to them at the time. I certainly know it feels that way to some of the students that I get to work with, but it's not. It'll be okay, and know that for yourself and for them moving forward. So make sure you give them the time and the space to talk about other things, to be looking at other things. So this is actually where I want to spend a little bit of time, because there is a lot of vocabulary that comes up. I know I mentioned that as an underpinning throughout where your students can be preparing themselves, but this is where I'm going to spend a bit of time. And if you have any questions on it later on, feel free to query me. So the first bullet point you're seeing up there has to do with how students apply. There are different application routes that students can choose. Some of you may know about this already, and feel free to tune me out a little bit if you do. But the ones I'm going to start with are early decision, so ED and ED2. So early decision 1, early decision 2, and I'll touch on RD, regular decision, kind of in conjunction with that, because those are the 3 rounds that we offer here at Lehigh. So you're probably familiar, or you may have heard of early decision before. The difference for early decision, at least here and for most places, both 1 and 2, has to do with for 1 and for 2, the application timing, right? You'd apply earlier, the deadline's going to be earlier, but the real difference is that early decision is a binding agreement. This is pretty true across the board at colleges and universities. If you are applying through early decision, your student is your student, most likely, and a counselor, at least for us, and I imagine for most other places, are agreeing that if you're accepted, if you're admitted to that school, you are going to attend. You are 100% determined that you're going to do that. You're signing this contract, agreeing to it. There tends to be some benefits to applying early decision for most places. It tends to have a smaller pool of applicants, tends to have a higher admission rate, but you have to balance all of that with the idea that it is this binding agreement, right? So I always encourage families, students, have a conversation about the schools that they're looking at, about the costs, talk with the offices of financial aid at different institutions you might be looking at to make sure that that school is really 100% the place that they want to be. Because if they apply early decision and they're admitted through it, they are expected to attend that school. Regular decision, RD, by contrast, is just kind of what you might think of as a normal standard application to college, right? You're going to submit an application, you're going to get that decision back. You'd have until May 1st to decide, presuming you don't decide somewhere else. That's true for most schools. You're not bound by that decision, but by the same token, typically going to have a higher pool of applicants. It's going to, I imagine, for most places, have a lower acceptance rate. But if you're a student, if you aren't sure where they want to go, if they don't know what they want to do, this is kind of a good way to move forward without that binding thing hanging over them. You know, they can, in most cases, apply regular decision and early decision to one institution. So you could apply regular decision elsewhere and then withdraw those applications if you were to be admitted, if they were to be admitted through early decision. The other ones you see up there are, I was going to say, a little bit less common, specifically REA. So these are early action, EA, and restricted early action. So early action, these are not things we have here at Lehigh, but other institutions do. Early action is non-binding. Essentially, it's like regular decision, but with a slightly advanced timeline on the part of the colleges or universities that you're looking at. So your student would get a decision back earlier. They would typically still have, I think, that May 1st decision deadline. So you wouldn't need to make that decision up front. It's not binding in the nature that early decision is. Restricted early action, I'm going to say, is fairly uncommon. If you do see it, it'll be like early action, but there will be some restrictions that can vary a little bit from school to school. So for some, there may be an agreement that by applying restricted early action, you are not going to apply early decision or early action elsewhere. That's kind of some things that I've seen, but like I said, it's relatively uncommon. It'll depend a little bit on the institution, but whichever application round you decide to do, make sure you're just cognizant of what it means for your student and what restrictions they're placing on themselves if they choose to do that, right? So restricted early action could be great in some ways, but it could also disadvantage a student in that they can't apply early decision or early action elsewhere. So you just want to be really cognizant when you're looking at the different schools of what they're meaning when they're saying about these application rounds and kind of what that's looking at for them. The next bullet point, AP, IB, DECL. I'm sure most of you probably recognize AP, right? Advanced placement courses. We're jumping back into high schools a little bit here. I sometimes get emails from students, right, where they're asking me, you know, Weston, Mr. Connor, what courses should I take if I'm applying to the College of Engineering, PC Ross College of Engineering here at Lehigh? And I obviously can't answer those questions for them. And I also can't answer that question for you and for the students that you have your children. But it's important, I think, to understand the variety of courses that are out there. So I think most high schools in the area here are offering AP courses, right? Those are the College Board's advanced placement courses. They all have an exam associated with them. Students are not necessarily mandated to take that exam, but if you do, you'll get a score from 1 to 5 on it. You can get sometimes college credit for it. That, again, is going to depend on the university, the college, the institution that you're looking at. But they're kind of higher level courses, typically above an honors level course. And like I said, you can kind of do those piecemeal. It's not a comprehensive program necessarily. Some high schools may require that students take those courses, or rather take the exams associated with them, but they don't always. I would say kind of the other big one that I see most often are the IB, so the International Baccalaureate Program. In some ways, these are similar to AP courses, right? They're higher level. Some schools may offer them kind of a la carte, like an AP course. You might be able to take an IB course, an AP course. You may see people taking them kind of across the board. But the place where these are different is that IB courses do exist within this kind of larger diploma program. So Some IB schools in particular may end up offering this 2-year IB diploma program. You would typically see students doing that junior and senior year, where I believe they would take a roster of 6 IB courses in various disciplines each year, along with a specific theory of knowledge course, which is really about kind of how knowledge is created, and things like that. The IB program says it focuses on things like critical thinking, curiosity, problem solving, but in some ways it is kind of a more unified package compared to the AP program, though I know they do have a capstone program as well that they're working with now. One of the big differences I would say is that students, I believe, are expected to take the IB exam for IB courses. So some high schools, like I said, may require students to take the AP exam, but this is really within that IB International Baccalaureate program. Students would be taking that IP diploma or IP exam associated with the course. Similarly, the AP exams, you might be able to get some college credit for these. Again, that's going to depend a little bit on the college and university, so you'd want to look at that. The other one up there, DE, dual enrollment courses. So these are becoming, I think, more and more common with high schools having partnerships with community colleges or local colleges and universities. There's going to be a lot of flexibility in how you see these done. Some students might literally go to a community college in an afternoon or in the morning, take some of these courses, go after school or on a weekend or what have you. Some might be offered in the high school, sometimes by community college professors, sometimes by high school teachers who are kind of certified and credentialed to be able to teach those. Different colleges, universities might treat those a little bit differently depending on how they're being offered, but know that those are kind of increasingly, I think, an option and something that I'm seeing in some of the applications that are coming in. The last one, CL, I'm just using a shorthand for college level. So this is really going to vary from high school to high school. Everyone is going to define what they call college level a little bit differently. Some might say that their AP courses are college level. Some would say that IB are. Some are going to have their own, highest level course that they're going to say is college level. Something that I end up looking a lot when I'm reading applications is actually a school profile that high schools put out there, which I actually think would be really interesting for parents to be able to look at. So if you Google your, child's high school and school profile, you'll probably be able to see it, and you can just see what they're actually providing to admissions officers, admissions counselors, to describe how their courses are leveled. But just know that with that CL, there's going to be a lot of flexibility and change between different high schools and how colleges and universities might view them in the context of that curriculum. The other kind of hot button issue, at least for the last few years, has been standardized testing. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the SAT, ACT, right, kind of big standardized exams that most colleges and universities have been looking at for a number of years now. And you've probably heard some of these terms that are with them: test optional, test flexible, and test blind. More and more schools are not requiring standardized testing, but there is, I think, a lot of variability on how they're kind of keeping that process going. So a school that says it is test blind is not looking at test scores, right? It is not going to look at them. It does not want to see them. Test optional, which is what Lehigh would call ourselves, means that students can choose whether or not they want to submit standardized testing. If we have it and the student says that they want us to look at it, then we look at it. It's just one component of that kind of holistic college review. I could talk more about that later if anyone has interest, but really it is up to the student. Test flexible might mean that they do require testing, but it might mean that they have different ways that you could fulfill that. So maybe you don't need the SAT or the ACT. Maybe you could fulfill it by submitting several AP exam scores or IP exams, right? So there's some flexibility on what they're looking for there outside kind of the base standard two big tests. What I will say, from my perspective, a useful tool is that most colleges and universities are probably going to publish somewhere on their website, their admissions website, the testing range, right, for their kind of middle 50% of admitted students. I would say take a look at that. You can use that as a guide to determine whether you think your child's test scores are in a range that would help them, that might not help them, or that would be right kind of smack dab in the middle of what the college is seeing in terms of its applicants and admitted students. The last big set of jargon is around financial aid and financial needs. So full disclosure, right, I am not a financial aid counselor, not a financial aid expert, but I do know a little bit, and I'm happy to help kind of fill you in on a little bit of this here. So I would say the big one, need blind, right? That is that a school is not looking at financial need. It is not something they're considering in their admissions process. The other two, need aware and need sensitive, I think sometimes get conflated to mean the same thing. And I will tell you, I would define them a little bit differently, but I do sometimes see people using them interchangeably. So you want to kind of query with schools how they're using it if you see it. For need aware, it means that schools kind of may or may not look at it, right? They have the ability to. It is information that will sometimes be considered in the holistic review process. Doesn't mean that it always is. And I would say, at least here at Lehigh, we are need aware. In the vast majority of cases, it is not something that's under consideration, but it can be, and in some certain cases it is. For need sensitive, I would probably define that more, and I've heard it defined more as schools do look at it, like financial need is something that they're actively considering in the application process, but some people have conflated that and might use it to mean what I just defined need aware as, right? It's something that they can look at, something that they may look at, but don't always look at. So as you're looking at the different institutions, again, really like query these terms, figure out what they mean by it, just so you understand and aren't laying down some incorrect expectations about what it is that you're looking at moving forward. So the next thing is kind of how to do a little bit of research. There are a lot of resources out there. Some big ones, obviously, the college website. I'd say that's probably, I was going to say a first place to start, but maybe not always. The places I think most students probably start, most families probably start, are kind of these big aggregators, right? From the College Board, they have a website, I think it's called Big Futures, and Niche or Niche. I'm actually never 100% sure of which way they like people to pronounce it. But these are both kind of big aggregators of information, right? You can build college lists. You can see a lot of statistics. Niche has some user reviews, just a lot of aggregated info. These are a great place to kind of get a start, right? Get a sense of narrowing down based on the factors that are important to your student, that are important to your family, whether that is cost, whether that is location, whether it's size, some of the programs they're offering. These could be a great tool to build kind of a big, broad list. And then I think you can dive more deeply through college websites, right? Those are obviously the firsthand information. You're going to find a lot of great info about what schools offer, what they have, some other resources that are out there. Some of you may already be getting or may start getting lots of college mailings. As someone who helps write some of the emails we send out to students, I can almost guarantee that your students' email will start getting flooded with college emails. I would actually encourage them to read some of those, not just for my own benefit, but it'll help them out too. There is information in there that can be useful for them. I know some students choose to make a separate email account just for college applications. That's fine. In some ways might be good. Make sure they're monitoring it if they do that. The other thing I would say is I would encourage students not to actually use a school, like high school email for their college things. I know that sometimes some of our emails and important messages get blocked by filters set up by high schools. So just that's a random 2-cent fact for you. Other great resources are people like me. Admissions representatives, college fairs. College fairs are a great opportunity to stroll around, get a look at a lot of different schools all at once. You can go up, grab a lot of materials, have some quick conversations. If there are more in-depth questions, in-depth things that they want to discuss, that they want to learn about, getting in touch with their admissions rep is a great way to do that. A lot of schools will look at or consider or track in some way demonstrated interest. That could be anything from visiting to doing an online program, to emailing their college representative for their region, right? And so can't hurt. I will say your children do not need to think up a reason to email somebody for no reason, but if they have questions, if they want to be in touch to express their interest, they can absolutely do that, and I would encourage them to. The other things that I would shout out are social media, current students, alumni. These are all great ways to gather some information. I actually don't know what Sarah meant by the asterisks here, but if I had to guess, it would be that these in particular might not always be true and factual sources of information. Things may have changed since the alumni have been there. Social media, I think we all know, is not always true to reality. And with current students, I think those are probably a pretty good resource, but students are only exposed to the things that they see, right? So their experience may not be representative of the entirety of the school. But definitely take advantage of all of these as you're thinking about what to do and as you're starting a list. So I hinted at a few of these earlier. The idea of fit with an institution, right, is I think the thing that should underlie a lot of what students are thinking about and looking at as they start to navigate the college admissions process and build that list. So here's just some of the things they could be thinking about: size, distance from home, the kind of setting they're in, whether that's rural, whether it's suburban, whether it's in the middle of a city, what kind of cultural opportunities, resources do they want to have available to them, right? Going to school here in Bethlehem is different than going to school in New York City. It's different than going to school in rural Michigan. What is it that they want to have out of their surroundings, out of their experiences? Some are more specific to the college university, right? Maybe they have a really strong idea of what they want to study. They should be looking at the programs that the schools offer, the majors that they have available, whether there's any special programs like the intercollegiate programs that we offer here. A little bit about that academic environment too, like what is the learning style like at that school? What are the focuses? Do we know that they have a really strong department or major in the thing that they're hoping to study? Or is this an instance where they can do a little bit of everything, but they're not going to be able to focus as specifically on the things that they already know they're interested in? Or maybe they don't have a clue exactly what they want to study yet. And that flexibility is something that's going to be really important to them. Selectivity is another part of it. I mentioned this earlier with expectation setting, right? But if a school only admits 3%, 5% of the applications that they receive, or 30%, or 40%, right? The odds are, depending on where you are in that spectrum, that you're more or less likely to get admitted. And know that going into it, have that expectation set so that your student, your family, whoever it is, right, isn't going to be met with a lot of disappointment down the road. Not to say that anyone in here would have a child who wouldn't get admitted to one of those highly selective institutions. Students obviously do. It's entirely possible, but that selectivity is something to be thinking about when you're managing those expectations moving forward. The other one is kind of the intangibles, right? How it feels being on the campus, what it's like being around the student body there. I know Sarah has the X through the BuzzFeed quiz. I think we could all imagine that's probably not a good way to decide on what schools to apply to. If you're going to do something like that, I would use the College Board, niche tools, some of those aggregators of information a little bit. But this is a good way to start. When you're thinking about fit, when you're looking at some of those factors, these are good reasons to visit, right? They have a reputation, or some information about the financial aid that they give out. Maybe you know that it's going to be a really affordable option, or you suspect that it might be. Maybe they have friends that go there. They've heard good things about the school. Why not? Go check it out, right? Maybe you or your significant other or parent or guardian decided to go there and you know a lot about the school. Maybe they know it's really close to home. That's where they want, or it's too close to home and they're not going to look. Maybe it's too far. Maybe it's too close. So be it. Great factors to put in there. They've heard through the grapevine. They heard online that it was good. These are all perfectly valid, great, acceptable reasons to check out a school. These are not good reasons to decide to go to a school, right? Might be offered a scholarship. If you don't know, don't choose it. Maybe you're going to have that information when you get your decision. Great, perfect. Don't choose it because your friends go there, because your mom or dad went there, right? Don't do it just because of location. Really be thinking about what the school offers and what your experiences, the students' research has shown for it. Little bit about how to visit. I think visiting can be a great option. I know it's not accessible for all families. More and more schools these days are offering online options, virtual opportunities to visit. I know we do. There's a way that you can find out more, learn about a school, whether you go there or not. But here are some things, to think about as you are looking to schedule a visit, as you're looking to figure out what's important to you when you and your child are visiting, right? First thing is the scheduling. Make sure you know what's offered. I cannot tell you the number of emails I get from people who can't figure out how to find out how to visit Lehigh, or who show up not realizing that there was a way to schedule a visit. And that's fine. I don't mind directing them to it. But Google, insert college name here, visit campus, or go to the admissions webpage. I guarantee you there's a place you can find to schedule a visit to see what's offered, whether that's a tour, whether it's an information session, whether it's a student panel, whether it's something else entirely. As to when to visit, I know not everyone has the flexibility or the ability to visit during the academic school year. In my opinion, the best time to go would be during the fall or spring semester, right? When students are on campus, when you can get a real sense for what the school is like, when it's lived in, when people are there doing the things that are going on. That's not possible for everybody. We absolutely have people who visit in the summer or over a winter or spring break or whatever that might be over the holiday season. And that's fine, right? Do what's right for you, do what's right for your schedule, but know that there's going to be a little bit of a different experience depending on when you choose to visit. Some of the things that you might want to observe. I'll talk a little bit more about some of the things to visit on campus when you're going around. But again, I would pay attention to the people, pay attention to the facilities, right? Are the buildings for, I don't know, the chemistry labs really run down, but they have a really great sports complex? Be cognizant of what's around you, right? Be cognizant of what the buildings are like. Be cognizant of what the people are like. I think you can get a sense of what an institution's like from how you're seeing the students interacting. Are they all just cloistered in a library, in a lab? There's nothing going on campus, or people hanging out outside? Are they wandering around? You can get a little bit of a feel for the intangibles, for the vibe of a place by seeing what the community is like. And that's why I think it's important to be there when students are there, if you can be. I'll touch more on questions to ask later, but think about what's important to you and your child. Think about what's important to them as a student, and do take notes as you're going along. You don't need to carry around a notepad as you're going, but you absolutely can. But don't let yourself just kind of visit, let it sink there and then float out of your mind, because you took the time to go to visit a place. You should remember what was important to you, what stood out to you as you're going along. I think having an open mind is really important. I remember during my college search process, I looked at some schools that I didn't think were necessarily going to be a place I was interested in, and that changed when I went to visit there. So try not to come with too many preconceived notions. The same thing holds true about what you're experiencing on the day there. Weather is going to make a difference on how you perceive it. There's a big difference between walking around campus here on a rainy, stormy day and coming out when the sun is shining and it's, 78 degrees out, right? I remember when I visited colleges, I went and looked at Bucknell, and I went there on a day there was a snowstorm, and I did not leave with a really great impression of that school, more because of that, I think, than because of anything else. So do remember that the weather does change. And if you have to be there on a rainy day, it's okay. But just remember that's not going to be representative of all the days there. And above all else, it is okay to visit a school and go like, no, this is not for me. If your child, your student, you go there and they figure out this is where they want to be, that's fine. They don't need to apply there. They don't need to do that. These can be positive experiences. They can be negative ones, and they can reinforce, different notions or different ideas. So keep that all in mind when you're going around to different places to figure out what's right for you and your student. Some of the things I would encourage you to do if you do a campus visit is what's listed up there. I'm not going to read it all to you, but talk to people, interact with students. Sorry, you'll probably have a tour guide. If you go and do a tour, talk with the admissions counselors. If you bump into people walking along the way and they look like they're okay for a conversation, say hi. Ask if they're liking their experience, right? If you have the chance to try an on-campus eatery, whether that's a dining hall or something else, I'd encourage you to do it. Your child is going to be eating that food for 4 years, most likely, and you should make sure that they like it at least a little bit, though don't let that, I would say, be the defining factor of the institution, right? And take the time to look around, to learn what you can about the school, and just reflect on what your experience was like there. Some of the questions that you might want to consider asking are up here. I know Holly's going to share the slide deck or have it available after this, so I won't read them all out to you, but these are some great questions you could do for just kind of general information gathering, right? Learning about some of the logistics of changing majors, learning about what it's like in terms of student life. Some of these are questions you can ask yourself and that the student should be asking themselves as they're going along. Some of these are questions you might want to ask of admissions or financial aid, right? Like, how are scholarships handled? How does the admissions process work? We went through all those terms earlier. If there are specific things with that school that you're not sure about, you're not clear on what need aware means for them, ask them. Odds are that they'll tell you. And if they don't tell you, then maybe that's not a place you want to be looking at so much. But take the time to think of some questions before you go somewhere that you want to ask. And I'd encourage you, if you can, to ask them at every place if they're kind of applicable across the board, so that you have some of that information to compare, so that you and your student has some of that knowledge going into things. One of the last things I'm going to touch on really is specific for you all. And it, again, has to do with expectation settings. Have conversations that are perhaps a little bit difficult with your student, with your child, about what the financial realities are of applying to schools, right? This is something that I think would benefit from more conversation within families earlier on rather than later, because schools are going to have different price tags. They're going to have different real costs. I would encourage you, as you're looking at schools, to use their net price calculators to get a sense of what you might be looking at, but know that is possible. That might not be a 100% reflection of what you would get as a financial aid package, especially if your student, your child is thinking about applying early decision somewhere. Have some conversations with their Office of Financial Aid, do the net price calculator, and see what that might look like moving forward. But really do have these conversations, and I say with, and I really do mean with your student, right? What is the expectation that you have? What is the expectation they have? Are you going to be at a place where you're like not going to do any loans, whether that's through an institution, whether it's through the government, public, private, what have you? Is that what your expectation is? Okay, then you got to tailor your search in a particular way. Are you going to be able to do some loans? Like, what is the cost that you guys are willing to pay? What's the cost that you're able to pay? And know that there might be a disparity in terms of what an institution calculates as what you are able to pay versus what you're willing to pay, right? So know that going in, and know that each school is going to calculate financial need a little bit differently. I'm sure you guys are familiar with like the FAFSA, the federal form. Most schools are probably going to require that, and most are going to require the CSS profile, I think, along with some other information, but it's going to differ a little bit from institution to institution, how they calculate what your kind of expected family contribution is. So just be cognizant of that. Have those discussions early on, because I think it's going to be a lot less enjoyable and a lot harder when you're sitting there with a pile of college acceptances and different financial aid packages, and the school that your student really wants to go to, you don't feel is affordable, or they don't think is going to be a good fit for them because of the package that they received. So be able to set those expectations and know what that is going into it. The other things to think about: understand what you could use 529s for, right? Those are savings investment accounts that you guys can set up for your children. I'm not an expert on them. Make sure you talk about them. And obviously, as faculty and staff here at Lehigh, there are benefits if your child was to be accepted here and decide to attend in terms of tuition and whatnot. And as Sarah wrote up there, and as I've hinted at, I know this is a hard conversation to have, but definitely make sure you have it before you move forward. And with that, I know we're kind of near the end of our time, but I will stop. Sarah's email is up there. I am sure if you have any questions for her, she would be more than happy to help answer them. And since I'm the one who actually came and gave the talk, I'm obviously happy to as well. So if anything comes up, you're welcome to reach out. Assuming most of you are living here in the Lehigh Valley, you can also look up, well, regardless where you are, you could also look up your regional representative for Lehigh if your child is interested in us moving forward. But I hope this was helpful. And if anyone has any questions now in the last few minutes, I'm definitely happy to try and answer them. And if they're ready in the chat, Holly, you can let me know.
Thank you, Weston. That was a great presentation, very informative. I have nothing in the chat right now, but I do have a question. Do you have any suggestions on the minimum or maximum of how many colleges a student should apply to?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, I don't know if there would be a number that I would be comfortable giving. In part because that has a lot to do with the kinds of places that a student might choose to apply. If they're applying to a lot of highly selective colleges or universities, then that list is probably going to want to be a bit bigger than someone who's applying to schools that have higher admission rates. I'd say having a student work with their guidance counselor or college counselor at their high school, assuming that that's a good resource for them. I know some counselors are more burdened with numbers of students that they work with than others. That could be a great resource. But I would say whatever number lets them have a good mix of schools, obviously, that they're interested in, but also that balance, some of those highly selective schools with some of those schools that are more likely to admit them, so that they have options, right? One way or another is kind of what I would say.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Michelle Conrad, she asked, what are the application due dates for early decision 1 and early decision 2 at Lehigh?
Yes, so ED1 is November 1st is the deadline to apply. For early decision 2 and regular decision, it is January 1st.
Michelle, also, if you go onto the Office of Institutional Research and Strategic Analytics website, under our data center, you can find the common data set, which shows enrollment and application dates, some fee requirements, and the tuition amounts, if that would be helpful to you.
Thank you. Where did you say you could find that at?
I'll send you a link. I'll put it in the chat.
Thanks so much. And thank you, Weston.
Yeah, no problem. I'll also say on that same token, there's less information here, but perhaps in some ways more easily digestible. You can definitely find some info about kind of Lehigh's admission statistics on our website there. I just sent a link in the chat. There's also a, just the broad admissions page, which has lots of great helpful links if anyone has other questions.
So I actually have a question. My daughter was just asking me this. This might be very specific for this purpose, but she was asking me about some of the admissions requirements. So she is trying to get out of taking a language class because she hates language classes. But I know there's like a 2-year foreign language requirement.
Yes.
So I guess the question is sign language now kind of recognized across the board as foreign language? Does it like check that box?
That's a good question. I don't know if I've ever explicitly been asked that. So don't take my word as gospel truth here, but I would say probably yes. I would think so, because I know most high schools count that, or a lot of high schools I'm aware of count that as a foreign language. It's
Yeah,
not
I know
one
her.
that.
Yeah, her high school, Liberty, I think, does count that for her requirement.
Yeah, I would say so long as, again, not gospel truth here, but so long as the high school is counting it, I suspect that we would as well. For the most part, we do have these minimum subject matter requirements. Almost everybody who graduates from high school has met them. So it's, 4 credits or units of English. I've got it pulled up here. The 2 of foreign language, 2 of social science, 2 lab science, 3 for math, and then 3 elective subjects. Almost everybody who graduates from high school has met those just by virtue of doing that. And so it's not usually a problem, but yeah, I think sign language would most likely satisfy that.
Well, I guess so. Another follow-up to that would be, do you make like conditional offers, like where you have an applicant you like, and then maybe they're a little short on something, so you give them an offer, but it's contingent on saying like, you got to complete this course in summer before you can actually start?
I'm not going to say that has never happened, but it has not happened to my knowledge, at least as I've been here. And so I think that would be really unusual for something like that to occur. I know there's a little asterisks on the foreign language one in particular, that requirement can be waived by the admissions committee for otherwise really well qualified applicants. So I know that has occurred from time to time. But I don't think that we commonly would admit people with conditional offers of admission. Usually we're giving them a definitive answer.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
College credits for some classes, but not an AP. For example, she's taking German 4 next year, and we can purchase those 6 credits. Do you find colleges accept those credits, or should we save the money?
That's a good question. I'm gonna say it probably really depends. So I'll be honest, I'm not sure on how that looks in the broader kind of college university universe. You might be able to ask registration academic services here how they might view something like that, because I know they're kind of the ones, I believe, who make the more definitive calls on what's given credit and or not credit here at Lehigh. I would suggest your daughter's college or high school counselor might be a better person to ask about that, just because they're going to have more experience with that school's curriculum. And maybe they might have some insight on how different colleges, universities have viewed that moving forward. But yeah, in truth, I'm not 100% sure on that answer. So apologies.
Thank you.
Sure.
I have another question. I'm wondering, and this might be hard to answer, but on average, what would you say about would be the average number of students that are applying to Lehigh that have taken AP classes? I'm just trying to get a range for kind of what might be a good target if you're trying to kind of look at the big picture to advise
Yeah.
students.
So, so I guess I'll speak a little more anecdotally from the applications I've read to give you some context. I have read applications from Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, and North and South Dakota. Most years I've been here. This past cycle, I read all the applications from Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. I can tell you anecdotally, almost, so with the exception of some private schools, which sometimes have their own kind of course designations, right? Almost everybody whose application I read had at least one or two AP or IB or kind of other high college level courses. Certainly, I would think the majority of the applications to Lehigh that I've reviewed have had at least 3 to 4. It's not uncommon to see more than that. Yeah, so that's a little bit of an anecdotal answer, but probably what I've seen at least. And I will say, right, there are absolutely people with less than that who are admitted to Lehigh, who are strong in other ways. We, like a lot of institutions, practice holistic admissions, so it's never just about the transcript. It's obviously an important part of it, but it's not just about the academics, it's about the person as a whole. So the advice I think I gave at the beginning, I really think would hold true, which is, students should challenge themselves as much as they're able, push themselves to take those hard courses, to challenge themselves academically, but absolutely, I think it's important that students think about their own mental health, think about the things that they want to be involved in, the things that they want to do for fun, because the application's not just all about their academics, and their life isn't just all about their academics, obviously. So hopefully that's helpful in some way.
Very much so. Thank you.
Sure. Anything else on anyone's minds?
Question. Oh,
Please.
sorry. Okay. Are early decisions accepted by a child of a Lehigh staff member?
You mean, could a child of Lehigh staff member apply early decision?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Yep. And
Okay.
yeah, if you'd, I don't believe there would be any reason that you couldn't do that. So if your child wanted to apply early decision, they could absolutely do so.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Cool.
Anybody else have anything?
One last question if no one else is going to jump in, but I have already asked one. So if anyone else wants to jump in, I'm okay with that. Okay. So some high schools, it seems like they have the college prep, the honors, the AP, ours has this other layer in there. It's kind of like an honors gifted something kind of, I forget the name. So is that where that profile comes in that you were talking about with the high school, where you would kind of look to see how the different colleges kind of label their classes? I mean, that's going to be more challenging than maybe a CP, but I don't know how your office would be so familiar with all the different levels of every college. So is that what you were getting at? Is that how you would understand that?
Yes. So part of it is that, right, we each work with a specific area. So as we continue to read those applications, we get to know them and get to recognize. I'm not going to tell you I know every single school in Massachusetts, but I've read their applications for 3 or 4 years now, something like that. And so I am more familiar now with, what Winchester High School offers as compared to Lincoln Sudbury, as compared to Lowell, right? Yeah, almost without fail, every high school will provide a school profile, which details what those different course levels are, what's offered, sometimes they'll provide like a, a histogram, I think, of GPA ranges of where students typically fall, of college acceptances in the past. It gives you a good kind of overview of schools. So with each application, we receive one of those with the student's transcript, and we look at that, and that gives us some context of, okay, like this is what's offered within the school. Because the other part of this is, some high schools offer 4 AP courses and some offer 24. So is that student who took 4 AP courses necessarily less compelling or impressive than somebody who took 16? I'm not going to say yes, they're not, because it's different, right? Maybe they took everything that was available to them, everything that was offered to them. Maybe that intermediary level is the highest course they could take in physics or whatever it might be. And so that's going to be a little bit different in that high school's context than someone over at a private school in Boston or at a public school in Michigan on the UP, right? So yeah, we get to know those schools, but those school profiles also help us calibrate and understand what's being offered at a particular high school.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Weston. That was fantastic. Thank you for all your great questions, guys.
Thank you.
If you don't have anything else, we will give the rest of the day back to you. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.